The morning air outside the courthouse in Denver felt sharper than usual, as if winter had returned overnight just to witness what was about to unfold. News vans lined the curb. Camera crews adjusted their tripods. Reporters spoke in hushed, urgent tones, careful not to appear too eager about a case that involved a 3-year-old child. Inside, the atmosphere was even heavier. Courtroom 4B was already full. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of silent spectators. The seal of the state hung high behind the judge's bench, watching over everything like an unblinking eye. Jurors sat stiffly in their seats, some flipping nervously through notepads they hadn't written in yet. No one wanted to look toward the defense table for too long. The man seated there kept his gaze fixed forward. He wore a dark suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders and an expression that seemed carefully rehearsed, neutral, calm, distant. But there was tension in his jaw, the kind of tension that betrayed sleepless nights. At the prosecution table, files were stacked in careful order, photographs sealed in evidence envelopes, timelines, statements, police reports. Everything was ready. Everything except the smallest and most important witness. A side door near the judge's bench opened quietly. A social worker stepped in first, offering a reassuring smile to no one in particular. Then, barely visible behind her, came Lily Harper. She was smaller than most people expected. 3 years old, blonde curls pulled into uneven pigtails, a pale blue sweater hanging slightly off one shoulder. In her arms, she carried a worn stuffed rabbit whose ears had been stitched back on more than once. She paused just inside the doorway. The room felt enormous to her. Dozens of unfamiliar faces, dark suits, hard wooden chairs, the faint smell of paper and polished floors. A low murmur drifted across the room before quickly dying down. The judge softened his voice. "Good morning, Lily." But Lily didn't answer. She pressed the stuffed rabbit against her cheek and buried her face into its fur. Her fingers tightened around it as if the toy might float away without warning. The prosecutor approached slowly, kneeling to make himself smaller. "Hi, Lily. My name is Mr. Callahan. Remember me?" No response. Her breathing grew shallow. She shifted her weight from one tiny shoe to the other. The social worker leaned down and whispered something gentle into her ear, but Lily's eyes remained fixed on the floor. Across the room, the defense attorney scribbled something on a yellow legal pad. The jurors exchanged glances. Everyone knew the risk. Children this young often shut down in formal settings. Words disappear under pressure. Memories retreat into silence. The judge cleared his throat quietly. "Is the support animal present?" A second door opened at the back of the courtroom. This time, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. A large German shepherd stepped into the room with calm, deliberate movements. His coat was a rich blend of black and tan, polished and immaculate. A badge-shaped tag hung from his collar, catching the light briefly as he walked. He was accompanied by an officer from the Denver Police Department, who gave the judge a respectful nod before taking a seat near the back wall. The dog did not pull on the leash. He did not scan the room nervously. He simply walked forward with steady confidence, as if courtrooms were no more intimidating than open fields. His name was Rex. The moment Lily heard the soft click of his nails against the wooden floor, she looked up. It was subtle at first, just a flicker of curiosity. Then she saw him fully. Her grip on the stuffed rabbit loosened. Rex approached slowly, guided only by a small gesture from the social worker. He stopped a few feet away from Lily and lowered himself onto the floor, his body language relaxed, his eyes soft. He did not stare. He waited. The courtroom watched something remarkable unfold. Lily took one cautious step forward. Then another. The social worker released her hand, allowing the child to choose. Lily hesitated, glancing briefly toward the defense table, toward the man she had been told would be there. Her body stiffened. Rex shifted slightly, not toward the defendant but closer to Lily. Just enough. Just protective enough. Lily moved the final step and reached out. Her fingers brushed the top of his head. Rex did not move. He did not wag wildly or break the stillness. He simply exhaled slowly, a warm breath that seemed to steady the air itself. Lily's shoulders dropped. The prosecutor exchanged a glance with the judge. Something had changed. Instead of retreating, Lily knelt down beside the dog. Her stuffed rabbit slipped from her arm and landed softly on the floor. With both hands now free, she buried her fingers into Rex's thick fur. A faint smile flickered across her face, the first sign of ease since entering the room. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Lily, can you tell us your name?" Silence. But it was different now. She wasn't frozen. She was thinking. Her tiny fingers twisted gently in Rex's collar. She leaned closer to his ear, her lips brushing against his fur as if sharing a secret. The microphone on the witness stand picked up only a faint murmur. The courtroom leaned in. Even the reporters in the back lowered their pens. The defense attorney shifted in his seat, watching carefully. Lily whispered again, this time a little louder. Rex's ears twitched. The prosecutor stayed perfectly still, resisting the urge to interrupt. Whatever was happening, it was happening on Lily's terms. The judge gestured for the bailiff to slightly adjust the microphone, careful not to startle her. Lily inhaled softly, still not looking at the judge, still not looking at the attorneys, only at Rex. And then, in a voice barely stronger than a breath, she spoke. Not to the courtroom, not to the adults who had prepared for weeks, but to the dog. The words were not yet clear enough for everyone to understand, only fragments carried through the speakers. But what was undeniable was this. She was speaking. For the first time since entering the courthouse, Lily Harper was not silent. And every person in that room understood that whatever she said next could change everything. Rex had a reputation before he ever entered the courtroom that morning. Years of service in the Denver Police Department had made him a legend in certain circles. He wasn't just a tracker, a search and rescue K9, or a narcotics detection dog. In one particularly harrowing case, he had guided officers to a missing child hidden in the Rocky Mountains for 2 days, never wavering even when supplies ran low and the terrain became perilous. That day, he earned medals and commendations, but more importantly, he earned trust and a remarkable intuition when it came to children. Now semi-retired from active duty, Rex had taken on a new role, courtroom support K9. His calm demeanor, steady breathing, and almost human-like patience with terrified witnesses had already earned him respect among social workers, prosecutors, and even judges. He had a knack for connecting with children in ways adults often could not. And today, he was Lily's anchor. The courtroom remained hushed. Cameras from news crews captured the moment, though no one dared disrupt it. Lily knelt by Rex's side, gently rubbing behind his ears. She seemed to shrink and grow simultaneously. Small as she was, there was suddenly an aura of courage that no one could ignore. "Lily," the social worker said softly, crouching beside her, "you're safe here. You can tell Rex anything." Her head tilted slightly, almost as if she understood the weight of the words. She reached even closer, pressing her face to Rex's fur. The prosecutor, Mr. Callahan, exhaled quietly. He had dealt with traumatized witnesses before, but nothing like this. No child, he thought, should ever have to relive what Lily had witnessed. She wasn't just scared. She was carrying a story heavy enough to crush an adult. And yet, with Rex by her side, there was a flicker of hope. "Rex, will you help me?" Lily whispered, barely audible. Rex responded as he always did. He didn't bark. He didn't shift nervously. He simply leaned closer, his warm body grounding her. He was her silent guardian. The judge observed quietly from the bench. He had seen comfort animals before, but this was different. There was a genuine connection here, something beyond training, something instinctual. The judge adjusted his glasses and leaned back, careful not to disturb the moment. The defense attorney frowned. He was used to controlling proceedings, guiding narratives, questioning witnesses. This was uncharted territory. A 3-year-old speaking only to a dog. How could this be admissible? He scribbled notes furiously, already preparing an objection, but even he had to admit there was something in the room no one could deny. Lily's attention was entirely on Rex, and in that attention she found courage. Lily's small voice broke the silence again. "He told me, don't tell anyone." The words barely reached the microphone. The courtroom leaned forward collectively. "Who told you that?" Mr. Callahan whispered, careful not to startle her. She shook her head. "I can't tell anyone, but you'll know Rex." Even the jurors felt it. This wasn't theatrics. This was a child speaking from instinct, trust, and memory. And Rex, lying patiently by her side, absorbed it all. He had a presence that seemed to absorb fear, channel it away, leaving only courage. Lily's fingers dug into Rex's fur. She took a deep breath. "He hit Mommy in the kitchen." Gasps rippled quietly through the courtroom. The social worker gave her a small nod of encouragement. The prosecutor's pen froze over his notes. The defense attorney rose, but the judge raised a hand. "Allow the witness to continue," he said. His voice was firm but kind. "She is speaking to her comfort animal, and that is permitted." Lily's eyes glistened as she whispered details to Rex, fragmented, halting, innocent. Yet every fragment confirmed something investigators had already suspected but had lacked definitive proof for. Broken items, unexplained bruises, the sequence of that dreadful night. She spoke of the loud crash, the lamp that had fallen from the counter. She described her mother's muffled cries from the locked bedroom. She mentioned hiding behind the sofa, clutching her rabbit tightly. Each word, though whispered to a dog, carried truth. Rex remained calm. He did not flinch. He did not allow the moment to become frightening for Lily. Instead, he pressed closer, providing a steady warmth. The courtroom noticed it subconsciously. There was an odd, silent rhythm forming. The child spoke, the dog listened, the adults absorbed. And for once, the dynamic of fear was reversed. Lily was no longer powerless. She had an ally. The defendant shifted in his chair. He whispered something inaudible, perhaps a warning, perhaps frustration. But Rex responded instinctively. He moved slightly, positioning himself closer to Lily. Not aggressively, not threateningly, but protectively. His eyes locked on the man for a fraction of a second before returning to Lily. No one in the courtroom had to say a word to understand the message. She was not alone. The social worker leaned in to ask a simple question. "Lily, can you tell Rex what happened next?" Lily took another deep breath, her tiny chest rising and falling like a fragile bellows. He went upstairs, then he broke the door," she whispered. Details that had been missing for weeks suddenly became clear. Officers had found the door's broken lock, but had been unable to place a timeline. Now, through Lily's innocent recollection, they had it. Mr. Callahan glanced at the jurors who sat wide-eyed. He whispered to himself, "Unbelievable." Lily continued, carefully enunciating every word meant only for Rex. "Mommy," she cried, "and I hid under the bed. Rex, I was scared." The room was quiet enough that the faint sound of a pen scratching across paper could be heard. Even the judge seemed suspended in a moment of delicate awe. Outside the courtroom, the media waited for sound bites, headlines, drama. Inside, there was none of that, only raw, genuine courage, and a bond between child and dog that transcended anything else. Rex, with his head resting lightly against Lily's shoulder, exhaled slowly. A subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but it anchored the child further into courage. She straightened slightly, inhaled deeply, and whispered one last detail before pausing. "They tried to hurt Mommy again, but you're here." No one spoke for a moment. Even the defense attorney lowered his pad. He was trained to argue, to challenge, to attack inconsistencies. But there was no inconsistency here. There was only truth, pure and untouchable, delivered through a child's trust in a dog. The judge cleared his throat, gently breaking the spell. "We will continue shortly," he said, but it was more than a procedural pause. It was a recognition of something rare and extraordinary. For Lily, the presence of Rex was not a procedural accommodation. It was a lifeline. It allowed her to navigate a terrifying adult space with the bravery she did not yet know she possessed. And for everyone watching, it became evident. In that courtroom, courage had 4 legs and a warm coat of fur. The whispers of the courtroom, the scratching of pens, the soft clicks of cameras, all faded into the background as Lily clung to Rex, her anchor in a storm she never wanted to navigate alone. No one knew exactly what she would say next, and perhaps that was the most riveting part, because every single word she whispered into Rex's patient ears would ripple through the court, slowly unraveling the truth hidden in darkness. And so Part 2 closes with the courtroom holding its breath, waiting for the 3-year-old to continue her quiet, powerful testimony. A testimony carried not through conventional means, but through trust, love, and a dog named Rex. The courtroom had grown still in a way that made every sound, a cough, a shuffle, the scratch of a pen, feel monumental. Lily Harper remained on the witness stand, kneeling beside Rex. Her small hands clutched the German Shepherd's fur as if it were a lifeline to safety, and in a strange, quiet way it was. She inhaled deeply, the tiniest tremor in her chest revealing the weight of what she was about to say. No one interrupted. The judge, the attorneys, the jurors, everyone seemed to sense that this was not ordinary testimony. This was something raw, human, and unfiltered, a story told in the purest form possible, through trust, courage, and a child's bond with a dog. Finally, Lily whispered. "He said, don't tell anyone." The words were so soft that at first they barely registered. Then they rippled through the courtroom and every adult froze. The defendant shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His gaze darted toward the young girl, but he could not meet her eyes. "Who told you that, Lily?" the social worker gently prompted. She shook her head, her curls brushing against Rex's ears. "I can't, but you'll know Rex," she murmured, her voice a fragile mixture of fear and trust. The prosecutor, Mr. Callahan, felt his heart tighten. He had heard dozens of child witnesses, read hundreds of statements, but never like this. A child speaking her truth through a dog, and a dog who instinctively understood every pause, every tremor, every shadow of fear. Rex's presence seemed to steady Lily's voice. Without him, she might have crumbled. With him, she was a narrator of truth no one could deny. The defense attorney rose immediately, scribbling furiously, preparing an objection. "Your Honor, this testimony is unconventional. A 3-year-old talking to an animal. There is no guarantee of reliability." The judge raised a hand, calm but firm. "Objection overruled. The court has recognized Rex as a certified support animal. The witness is speaking with the support of a qualified comfort dog. Continue." Lily didn't pause. She seemed to understand instinctively that Rex's presence allowed her to speak safely. She described the events of that night in fractured sentences, halting and simple, but precise enough to shock the room. He hit Mommy," she whispered, her tiny voice steadying as she pressed her cheek to Rex's fur. "In the kitchen, I hid under the table. I was scared." Gasps spread quietly across the courtroom. The jurors leaned forward in their seats, unable to look away. Even the reporters' cameras, poised and ready for drama, captured only silent tension. The prosecutor nodded gently. He knew not to interrupt. Every detail was important. Broken objects, bruises, a locked bedroom door, these were pieces of a puzzle investigators had struggled to fit together. And now, in a tiny, trembling voice, they began to form a clear picture. Lily's memory, expressed through whispers to Rex, revealed what no one else had been able to confirm. A loud crash near the kitchen sink. A broken lamp lying in shards on the floor. The muffled sounds of her mother crying from a locked room upstairs. Every sentence, every fragment, aligned with the evidence collected by officers, and yet it felt miraculous. This was not rehearsed testimony. This was truth delivered organically, naturally, instinctively, spoken through trust in a dog. Rex remained calm beside her. He had been trained to detect stress in humans, to respond without escalating fear. And today, his intuition was proving invaluable. He shifted slightly, pressing his warm side against Lily as if to say, "You are safe. Continue. I'm with you." The courtroom noticed. Even the judge, who had presided over thousands of cases, seemed momentarily captivated. Jurors leaned forward, silently urging the child to continue. "Then he tried to take my rabbit," Lily whispered, clutching the worn toy. "I hid it, Rex. He couldn't find me." The defense attorney's pen scratched furiously across his notepad. He whispered something to the defendant, who shook his head subtly, eyes flicking toward Lily and Rex. But neither could break the invisible line of trust the child had created with the dog. Lily described the sequence of events with startling clarity for a child her age. She spoke of the fear she had felt, the shadows in the hallway, the loud voices, and the way her mother had tried to shield her. Every statement was small, broken, and innocent, yet each sentence carried undeniable weight. The prosecutor knew he had to proceed delicately. "Lily," he said softly, "can you tell Rex what happened next?" She nodded, taking a deep breath. "He went upstairs. Mommy tried to hide. I watched. He broke the door. I was scared. Rex, you're here." The courtroom remained silent except for the soft whisper of Lily's voice and the gentle exhale of Rex. It was as if the dog's presence had paused time itself. Even the jury seemed caught in the gravity of the moment. Each word added clarity. Investigators had documented bruises, broken furniture, and a timeline that had previously been fuzzy. Now, piece by piece, it was being reconstructed in the child's memory, guided by the steady presence of a dog. Lily's voice trembled briefly. She pressed her forehead to Rex's head, inhaling his reassuring warmth. Then she whispered again, "I wanted to be brave like you, Rex." There was a subtle shift in the room. Her mother, sitting silently in the gallery, wiped away tears, relieved that her daughter could finally share the story safely. Reporters scribbled furiously, though most understood that the most important moments couldn't be captured fully on paper. The defendant shifted again. He muttered something low, almost inaudible. Instinctively, Rex moved, positioning himself slightly closer to Lily. Not threatening, not aggressive, protective. A silent shield. The judge noticed but did not intervene. He knew Rex's instinctual protection was crucial to Lily's ability to continue. The courtroom had become a delicate ecosystem. Child, dog, judge, jury, all bound by the invisible thread of trust and courage. Lily continued recounting small details, fragments that adults had overlooked. She described the sounds in the house, the fear of being caught, and the moments when she thought no one would help. Each word, though directed at Rex, was absorbed by everyone present. "It had hurt," she whispered. "I cried, Mommy cried, but Rex, you kept me safe." At that moment, every adult in the courtroom understood something profound. A child's voice, when given trust and safety, could speak more truth than any adult could coerce. The social worker encouraged her softly. "You're doing great, Lily. Tell Rex everything you remember." And so she did. Every fragmented memory, every whispered fear, every observation of the man who had caused them pain flowed gently into Rex's attentive ears. The courtroom, silent and captivated, became witnesses not only to testimony, but to a bond that transcended fear and formal procedure. By the end of the morning, investigators and the prosecution had notes they never expected. They had a timeline. They had context. And most importantly, they had the raw, unfiltered truth delivered through the trust of a child and the quiet courage of a dog. The first words had changed everything. Part 3 closes as Lily leans fully against Rex, exhausted but calmer. For the first time in the day, she smiles faintly, feeling the steady reassurance of her four-legged confidant. The courtroom knows that what has begun here, a story whispered into a dog's ear, will echo far beyond these walls, into the hearts of every person present. And for Lily, Rex, and everyone watching, the next chapter promises revelations even more astonishing. The courtroom had become a chamber of hushed tension. Each breath, each tiny movement seemed amplified. Lily Harper, kneeling beside Rex, had already revealed fragments of a night that had haunted her family. And yet, the most critical pieces were still locked within her memory, waiting for the right moment and the right presence to be released. Rex, calm and steadfast, seemed to sense it too. His ears twitched slightly, his eyes focused gently on the child. He shifted closer as if to say, "It's okay, I'm here. You can tell me." And Lily knew she could. The social worker whispered softly, kneeling beside her. "Lily, tell Rex what happened in the living room." Her small hand slid over his neck, fingers entangling in his thick fur. He knocked things, the lamp it fell," she murmured. The sound of her voice, though tiny, carried the weight of every shock, every shattering moment she had endured. The jurors leaned forward, unable to turn away. The broken lamp on the kitchen floor had been documented in evidence photographs, but no one had ever seen it through the eyes of the child who had experienced it firsthand. Lily's words now brought those photographs to life. The prosecutor, Mr. Callahan, stayed calm but noted everything meticulously. Every detail she whispered to Rex confirmed timelines that had previously been uncertain. Officers had discovered damage, but connecting it to the precise sequence of events had been challenging. Now, through a child's recollection, raw, unfiltered, and entirely honest, those connections became clear. She was crying, "Mommy," Lily whispered. Her voice trembled, but she continued. "I tried to hide under the table." Her tiny fingers gripped Rex's fur tighter. He responded instinctively, pressing his warm body against her, grounding her fear. This simple gesture allowed Lily to speak about events she had likely buried deep in her memory. The courtroom watched, rapt. Even the defense attorney seemed momentarily silenced, unable to argue against the innocence and truth manifest in this fragile child and the dog at her side. Then Lily whispered something that made the judge pause. He went upstairs, broke the door. Mommy tried to stop him. I was scared." There was a collective intake of breath. Investigators had previously found the broken bedroom door, but they could not verify exactly what had happened that night. Lily's innocent recollection, given in fragments, directed at Rex, now filled in the critical gaps. Rex remained calm, but his protective presence did not go unnoticed. When the defendant shifted uncomfortably, Rex moved slightly, positioning himself between the child and the man. Not aggressively, not threateningly, but as a silent shield. The subtle gesture was enough to communicate a protective boundary without intimidating anyone. The social worker encouraged her gently. "It's okay, Lily. Tell Rex what happened next." Lily nodded, her curls brushing against Rex's shoulder. I heard the yelling, then the crash. Mommy," she tried to hide. "I held my rabbit." Her words were broken, halting, but they carried clarity no adult testimony could match. They were snapshots of fear, painted with the brush of memory and innocence. "Who else was there, Lily?" the prosecutor asked softly. She shook her head. "Nobody, just Mommy and me and Rex." The courtroom felt the weight of the statement. A child who had endured so much was now reliving her experience, yet doing so with trust. Trust in a dog, trust in an ally who would never betray her. She tried to get help," Lily whispered. I ran and he tried to stop me." The jurors were leaning forward now, hanging on every word. The defense attorney's pen scratched furiously, trying to keep pace, but it was hopeless. This was not a carefully rehearsed testimony. It was the unfiltered voice of truth. Rex's presence was not merely comforting, it was essential. Lily's memory had opened only because she felt safe. Every detail she whispered, the broken lamp, the shattered door, the muffled cries, her fear, flowed through the courtroom, carried by trust in a dog who understood the stakes more than anyone else in the room. Lily continued, recounting small, critical details that investigators had overlooked. She mentioned the knocked-over chair in the hallway, the sound of the refrigerator door slamming, and the way shadows moved across the kitchen floor. Each detail aligned perfectly with the physical evidence collected days earlier. Even the judge, who had witnessed countless cases, was visibly moved. He adjusted his glasses, leaning forward slightly, and allowed the testimony to continue uninterrupted. There was a gravity here that no procedural formality could override. He tried to take the rabbit again," Lily whispered, clutching the worn toy. "I hid it, Rex. He couldn't find me." Rex's steady warmth allowed her to speak. The jurors, the lawyers, and the judge all recognized something extraordinary, a child's unfiltered truth, delivered through a dog's instinctual reassurance. The defense attorney rose, frowning. "Your Honor, I object." The judge raised his hand. "Sustained in the sense that you may continue, but the court acknowledges the child's comfort animal is permitted. Please remain seated." The small gesture was enough to reinforce Lily's courage. She took a deep breath and leaned closer to Rex. I saw Mommy hiding. I wanted to help. I was scared, but you were here." Even the social worker could not hide a tear. For the first time, Lily's words had not only told a story. They had conveyed the depth of fear, the innocence stolen, and the courage reclaimed in a single breath. The prosecutor leaned forward slightly. "Lily, can you tell Rex about the people upstairs?" She nodded, her eyes wide and earnest. He was mean. He tried to take Mommy. I was hiding. Rex, you kept me safe." Every word landed with weight. Every whisper added context. The defense attorney's objections had been silenced not by ruling, but by the undeniable reality of a child recounting her experience in her own way. The jurors exchanged glances. The images in their minds were not dramatized or sensationalized. They were raw, honest, and terrifying. Lily continued for another 10 minutes, each sentence a piece of the night's puzzle. Broken items, loud crashes, cries, shadows, and fear all emerged, connected by the invisible thread of Rex's silent presence. By the time the morning session drew to a close, investigators had a much clearer understanding of the events. The prosecution had compelling, detailed accounts that corroborated physical evidence. The jury, moved and quiet, understood that something extraordinary had occurred. A child's testimony delivered through trust, courage, and a dog. Lily hugged Rex one final time before standing. Her cheeks were flushed, her curls slightly disheveled, but her eyes shone. For the first time that morning she looked at the courtroom, her gaze more steady. The judge nodded, acknowledging her bravery. "Thank you, Lily," he said softly. "You did very well." Rex sat back, calm and watchful, his mission accomplished for the morning. But everyone in the courtroom understood something crucial. Without him, Lily might never have found her voice. The room exhaled collectively, aware that the next session would reveal even more, perhaps the most crucial details of all. And so, Part 4 closes as Lily sits beside Rex, a tiny figure of courage whispering fragments of truth that will shape the outcome of a case far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The courtroom felt heavier than ever, the tension thick enough to almost touch. Lily Harper remained kneeling beside Rex, her small hands clutching his thick fur as though it were a lifeline. Every adult present could feel it. This child, fragile yet brave, was recounting events that not only exposed past trauma but also held the power to shape justice. And Rex, calm, alert, and instinctively protective, was the unseen force that allowed her voice to emerge. It happened suddenly. The defendant, who had been shifting uncomfortably in his chair for the past hour, muttered something under his breath. His tone was low, but his words carried menace, enough for anyone paying attention to sense the threat. Even without intention, his body language screamed intimidation. He leaned slightly toward the stand, and the energy in the room shifted instantly. Rex, attuned to both Lily's fear and the subtle cues of threat, moved, not with aggression, not with a bark or a growl. He simply rose from his resting position and stepped between Lily and the man. His massive frame loomed gently, a silent barrier. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, met the defendant for a fraction of a second. Then he returned his attention to Lily. The courtroom froze. Witnesses, jurors, attorneys, even the judge all held their breath. No one had expected a dog, a support animal no less, to assert such authority. But it was instinctual, protective, pure. In that moment, Rex was not merely a comfort, he was a guardian. Lily, sensing the subtle shift, relaxed slightly. Her tiny body leaned against him. His calm presence reminded her that she was safe. For the first time in hours, she didn't flinch at the man's presence. She was empowered by the quiet strength of a four-legged friend. The judge, recognizing the unusual but undeniably impactful moment, did not intervene. He allowed the dog's protective instincts to continue, understanding that it was critical to Lily's ability to speak. The defendant leaned back, a flash of unease crossing his face. His lawyer whispered quickly, words lost in the tense silence. It was evident. Rex's silent stand had changed the dynamics of the courtroom in a way no human argument could. The social worker whispered gently to Lily, kneeling beside her. "It's okay, honey. You're safe. Just tell Rex what happened next." Lily inhaled deeply, her small chest rising and falling. He went upstairs. Mommy tried to hide. I held the rabbit. I was scared." Her words, though simple, painted a vivid picture of the night's terror. Every fragment connected to the physical evidence collected by investigators. The jurors leaned forward in their seats, unable to look away. The defense attorney scribbled notes frantically, but even he realized the weight of what was happening. This testimony, delivered through trust in a dog, was impossible to dispute without seeming callous or dismissive of a terrified child. Rex remained calm, his steady breathing almost rhythmic, a grounding force for Lily. Every time her voice wavered, she pressed against him, and he responded with gentle nudges and unwavering presence. It was as if he were silently saying, "You are safe. I will not let anything harm you. Speak your truth." The prosecutor, Mr. Callahan, understood the importance of letting Lily continue uninterrupted. He leaned slightly forward, listening closely, but offered no prompts that might disrupt the delicate rhythm. Every whispered word mattered. She tried to stop him," Lily whispered. Her voice shook briefly. I ran, he came after me." Rex shifted slightly again, reinforcing his protective stance. The room collectively recognized the subtle but powerful message. The child was never truly alone. Her small voice carried enormous weight, amplified by the unwavering support of a loyal companion. The judge, usually reserved and formal, leaned forward, clearly captivated. He had presided over countless cases, but nothing compared to witnessing this child's courage manifested through trust in a dog. He allowed the testimony to continue without interruption, recognizing that every moment was crucial to establishing the truth. Lily described small, yet critical details: the sounds of the hallway, the slamming of doors, the shuffling of feet. Each fragment corroborated evidence the police had collected but could not fully contextualize, and all of it emerged through her innocent perspective, guided by Rex's calm presence. The defendant shifted again, uneasy under the dog's unwavering gaze. His muttered protests went unheard by most, but the tension was palpable. It was a subtle but unmistakable effect. Rex's mere presence altered the dynamics of authority in the room. The social worker encouraged Lily softly. "Tell Rex everything you remember, honey. You're doing so well." I heard shouting, crashing, "Mommy," crying. I hid. "Rex, you kept me safe." Even the jurors recognized the emotional gravity. These words, though directed to a dog, conveyed truths no adult could have articulated with such clarity. The fragments of fear, observation, and memory painted a vivid tableau of the night's events. Rex's body remained a constant shield. He did not intimidate the defendant with aggression. Instead, he radiated calm and protection, silently communicating, "The child is mine to safeguard." Every observer understood this instinctive, unspoken communication. For Lily, Rex was more than a dog. He was courage made tangible, a constant reminder that she could speak without fear. The room, despite its official procedures and formalities, had transformed into a space where trust, courage, and instinct dictated the pace of justice. Minutes passed, but for Lily, each second was a step forward. She recounted broken furniture, loud crashes, her mother's attempts to shield her, and her own desperate efforts to hide. Every word, though halting, carried truth and clarity. He broke the bedroom door," Lily whispered. "I saw Mommy hiding. I wanted to help. I was scared." The jurors' faces reflected empathy, shock, and growing understanding. The defendant's composure faltered as he realized the child's words could not easily be dismissed. Even the defense attorney struggled to find footing in the face of such pure, instinctive testimony. Rex, sensing Lily's fear rising briefly, pressed closer. His warmth and calm breathing grounded her. She exhaled, then continued. I wanted to be brave like you, Rex." The courtroom collectively felt the weight of her words. This tiny child, 3 years old, was articulating courage in its purest form. And the dog beside her, instinctively protective, had become more than a witness support. He was the enabler of truth. The judge, silently acknowledging the extraordinary moment, allowed the session to continue. He knew that Rex's presence was essential, not only to Lily's ability to speak, but to ensuring that the courtroom received the full, unfiltered truth. The social worker whispered encouragement once more. "Keep telling Rex what happened. You're doing wonderfully, Lily." And she did. Every whispered fragment of memory, every expression of fear, every observation of her mother and the events unfolding that night was delivered with the unshakable reassurance of Rex's presence. By the end of the session, every adult in the courtroom recognized something profound. Courage does not always come in the form of words. Sometimes it has 4 legs, a wagging tail, and eyes full of understanding. And in that courtroom, Lily Harper's courage, channeled through trust in a dog named Rex, had shifted the balance of power, not through aggression, not through argument, but through pure, instinctive protection and the ability to speak truth safely. Part 5 closes with Lily leaning against Rex, exhausted but braver than she had been all morning. The room exhaled collectively, aware that the child had taken the first real steps toward telling her story completely, and that the next sessions would reveal even more details that could change everything. By the time the afternoon session began, the courtroom had settled into a tense quiet. Every adult present understood that the testimony of a 3-year-old was unlike any other, especially when delivered with the aid of a police dog like Rex. Every whisper from Lily Harper seemed to carry more weight than any adult witness could muster. Each fragment of memory, delivered through trust in her 4-legged confidant, was becoming a roadmap to the events of that fateful night. Rex lay close to Lily, calm and alert, his presence almost electric in its reassurance. He had been by her side through every hesitation, every pause, every tremor of fear. His soft breathing and steady gaze were the anchors she needed to speak truths that otherwise might have remained buried. Lily clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly and looked up at Rex, Her tiny voice, barely audible at first, carried across the hushed courtroom. I was hiding," she whispered, pressing her cheek against the dog's fur. "I wanted to be brave like you." A soft murmur spread among the jurors. Even the seasoned court reporters lowered their pens, captivated by the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. There was no theatricality in her words, only raw, unfiltered emotion. Every observer could feel the fear, the innocence, and the courage that combined to form a powerful narrative. Her mother, sitting quietly in the gallery, dabbed at her eyes. She had held her own fear close for weeks, but seeing her daughter speak freely, guided by Rex, brought tears she had long held back. This tiny child, so vulnerable, was telling the truth of their lives, a truth that had been silenced until now. Lily continued. He came in, Mommy. She tried to stop him. I was scared." Each word matched pieces of evidence gathered by investigators. Bruises, broken furniture, shattered doors, all had been documented, yet without context. Lily's voice, guided by her trust in Rex, filled in the missing links, connecting a timeline that had previously seemed fragmented. Rex responded instinctively. He leaned closer, pressing his warm side against her. His calm presence seemed to steady her trembling voice, allowing her to deliver details she could not have shared alone. The prosecutor, Mr. Callahan, watched closely, careful not to interrupt. Every whispered word was critical. Every fragment of memory could tip the scales of justice. He understood that the credibility of the testimony was bolstered not only by the child's innocence, but by the undeniable bond of trust between her and Rex. She tried to hurt me too," Lily whispered, holding onto the dog tightly. "But you were there, you kept me safe." The courtroom was silent except for the soft sound of her voice and the subtle rustle of papers. Even the defense attorney seemed momentarily paralyzed by the scene. A 3-year-old speaking to a dog, recalling trauma in such detail, was not something he could easily counter. Lily's words continued, each fragment revealing a new dimension of the night. She described the loud crash of a lamp falling, the shuffling footsteps on hardwood floors, the muffled cries of her mother hiding in the bedroom. Each detail confirmed what investigators had suspected but could not prove with certainty. Then, a moment that no one in the courtroom would ever forget. I saw him take Mommy's phone. I wanted to call help, but he stopped me." Lily's voice broke slightly. Her mother gasped softly. The jurors shifted in their seats, leaning closer. The defendant's jaw tightened, his composure faltering under the weight of evidence being laid bare not through coercion or argument, but through the pure, innocent voice of a child. Rex remained steadfast. He did not growl, did not bark. He simply pressed his body closer to Lily, his eyes gentle yet alert. His presence reinforced a silent message. You are safe. Speak. The truth will be heard. The social worker whispered encouragement. You're doing so well, Lily. Tell Rex everything you remember. Lily's voice strengthened slightly. He came back, Mommy, she was scared. I held my rabbit, Rex. You kept me safe. Every whispered word painted a vivid picture. The jurors, the reporters, and even the judge could see the events through her eyes. The fear, the confusion, the helplessness, all laid bare, yet carried with a courage no one could teach. The defendant shifted again. Rex reacted instinctively, moving slightly to maintain the protective barrier. It was a subtle gesture, yet it conveyed volumes. He was not aggressive. He was unwavering, and it was enough to alter the energy in the room, shifting the balance in favor of the child's testimony. Lily continued, recounting fragments of memory in broken sentences that were nonetheless crystal clear. The door, it broke. Mommy tried to hide. I wanted to be brave. The room was silent except for the whispers of a small child and the steady breathing of a dog. For the first time, every observer understood something extraordinary. Courage could take many forms. Sometimes it was a child whispering fragments of truth. Sometimes it was a dog standing beside her, unyielding and instinctively protective. He tried to stop me, but you were there." Lily's words reverberated through the courtroom. Even the jurors, who had seen and heard many cases, were visibly moved. The defense attorney scribbled notes frantically, trying to maintain composure, but even he could not ignore the impact of the scene before him. Her voice wavered for a moment, then strengthened. I wanted to be brave like you, Rex. You kept me safe." The judge nodded slightly, acknowledging the bravery of a child speaking her truth through the bond of trust with a dog. This was testimony unlike any other, and the courtroom recognized it. The social worker gently reminded her, "You're doing amazing, Lily. Tell Rex everything." Lily's words continued to flow, each fragment revealing new details. She described her fear, the broken objects, the attempts to hide, the attempts to protect her mother. Each detail confirmed the evidence investigators had collected and brought a clarity no adult witness could provide. The jurors, silent and captivated, began to realize that the testimony they were hearing was more than words. It was the living memory of a child who had survived terror, guided by trust in a dog who instinctively knew how to protect her. By the end of the session, Lily leaned fully against Rex, exhausted but relieved. The room seemed to collectively exhale. Every person present had witnessed something extraordinary: courage, truth, and protection woven together in a way that defied conventional legal procedures. Her mother, tears streaming, whispered softly to her daughter, "You were so brave." Lily looked down at Rex, her small face full of trust and gratitude. He wagged his tail gently, as if acknowledging the unspoken bond between them. The judge called for a brief recess, allowing the courtroom to process the intensity of what had just occurred. Even in the hallways, whispers of astonishment circulated. Reporters knew they had witnessed something remarkable, beyond the headlines or sensationalism. A story of trust, courage, and the extraordinary role a dog played in delivering truth. For Lily, the session had been transformative. She had found her voice, spoken her truth, and realized she was not alone. Rex had been her shield and her anchor, enabling her to recount events that would shape the outcome of a trial far beyond what anyone had anticipated. And for everyone in the courtroom, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, the most profound witnesses are not adults, not lawyers, not even judges. Sometimes, they are the ones who provide trust, safety, and silent courage. Part 6 closes as Lily sits beside Rex, exhausted yet resolute. Her voice has broken through silence, her truth has begun to emerge fully, and the courtroom and the case itself will never be the same. The courtroom had grown quiet, almost reverent, as the day wore on. Lily Harper remained close to Rex, kneeling beside him, her small hands clinging to his thick fur. Her testimony had stretched through hours, but the impact was far from over. Every fragment of memory she had whispered into the dog's ear had left the courtroom, jurors, attorneys, reporters, and even the judge holding their collective breath. The details were chilling, yet profoundly human. Rex had become more than a support animal. He was the bridge between Lily's fear and the courtroom's understanding. His calm, protective presence allowed her to recount moments of terror with a courage that no one could have anticipated from a 3-year-old. Each movement of his body, a gentle nudge, a shift of weight, a soft exhale, was a silent message. You are safe. Speak your truth. The jurors had been instructed to remain objective, to consider the evidence carefully. But it was difficult to remain untouched by what they had just witnessed. This was not a story told in polished statements or rehearsed recollections. It was raw, unfiltered, delivered through trust, fear, and the bond between a child and a dog. Several jurors exchanged subtle glances, acknowledging something extraordinary. One juror whispered quietly to another, careful not to be overheard by the court officers, "I've never seen anything like this. She's telling everything, but she's brave." The prosecutor, Mr. Callahan, observed them carefully. Every fragment of Lily's testimony had added clarity to the timeline of that night. Broken furniture, slamming doors, muffled cries. The evidence now had context, and the jurors were absorbing it in a way that charts and photos could never convey. Even the defense team was acutely aware that Lily's voice, though whispered to a dog, carried undeniable weight. Her innocence and trust in Rex had given her the power to recount events fully and accurately. No objection, no legal maneuver, could diminish the emotional truth they had witnessed. Lily's small voice returned to the room's consciousness. He tried to hit Mommy again. I was hiding, Rex. You were there. The words were simple, almost fragile, but they carried enormous force. Every juror leaned forward, trying to process the events through the eyes of a child who had endured them firsthand. The judge allowed the testimony to continue. Even seasoned observers of the law recognized that this was an extraordinary case. A child so young, speaking in fragments to a support animal, yet revealing critical details that corroborated and expanded the physical evidence. Rex responded instinctively, sensing a slight tremor in Lily's voice. He pressed gently against her, reminding her that she was not alone. She inhaled, steadying herself, and continued. I wanted to help, but he was too strong. I held my rabbit. Mommy tried to hide. Rex, you kept me safe. The jurors' faces reflected empathy, shock, and admiration. They had heard many testimonies, but none like this. The raw, emotional truth, unmediated by adult interpretation, was impossible to ignore. Outside the courtroom, reporters whispered among themselves, aware that they were witnessing a story that transcended headlines. This was not sensationalism, it was courage. And courage, it seemed, had 4 legs, a wagging tail, and a steady gaze. Inside the courtroom, the defense attorney leaned over to the defendant, whispering rapidly. The man's jaw tightened, his composure faltering under the weight of Lily's testimony. He had expected to challenge witnesses, to cast doubt, to argue inconsistencies. But here, in the presence of a child and a dog, his usual strategies seemed powerless. The social worker leaned close to Lily and whispered words of reassurance. You're doing wonderfully, honey. Tell Rex everything you remember. Lily inhaled deeply, then whispered another fragment of memory. He shouted, things I didn't understand. I was hiding. I didn't want him to see me, but Rex, you kept me safe. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the faint sound of her small breath and the soft click of Rex's nails as he shifted slightly. Even the judge seemed momentarily captivated by the scene, recognizing that this testimony was extraordinary not only for its content, but for the courage it demanded. Minutes stretched as Lily continued, recounting broken lamps, overturned chairs, slamming doors, and muffled cries. Each fragment of memory, though directed at Rex, was absorbed by every person in the courtroom. The jurors, in particular, seemed transformed by the experience. They weren't just observers of evidence. They were witnesses to a child's lived experience of terror and the extraordinary bond that enabled her to share it. He hurt Mommy. I was scared, Lily whispered. Her small voice trembled, but Rex remained steady beside her. His calm exhalations seemed to reinforce her courage, each one a silent affirmation. You are safe. Speak your truth. The prosecutor nodded gently, careful not to interrupt. Every detail mattered. Every word added weight to the case. The timeline, previously fragmented, was now forming a cohesive narrative that even the most skeptical observer could follow. Lily's words shifted slightly, moving from fear to observation. I saw him take things. The phone. Mommy tried to stop him. I could. The courtroom felt the gravity of the moment. Her observations, though fragmented and innocent, filled in critical gaps in the investigation. Investigators had known about the broken furniture, the bruises, the timeline, but no adult witness could have provided the clarity and emotional context that Lily's testimony, guided by Rex, offered. Rex responded subtly, leaning closer, his presence grounding her. She exhaled, gathering courage, and continued. I wanted to tell, but he said, No, Rex, you were there. The jurors were visibly moved. One of them dabbed at a tear, careful not to draw attention. The courtroom understood that the truth was being delivered not through argument, not through polished legal language, but through the trust between a child and her dog. The defense attorney's pen scratched furiously, but even he could see that conventional methods would struggle to counter the clarity of what had been shared. Lily's words, though whispered, carried undeniable credibility, amplified by the bond she had with Rex. The judge called for a brief recess. "We will continue shortly," he said softly, giving the room a moment to process the extraordinary testimony. Lily hugged Rex gently, exhausted but relieved. She had found her voice, spoken her truth, and realized she was not alone. Her courage, bolstered by the dog beside her, had begun to shift perceptions, not just of the events of that night, but of the very nature of testimony and trust. Outside the courtroom, murmurs of astonishment spread. Reporters knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a child's unfiltered truth delivered through trust, courage, and the silent support of a dog. Inside, the jurors quietly discussed what they had seen. They were instructed to remain impartial, but no one could ignore the impact of what they had just witnessed. Courage had a voice, and it had 4 legs, a wagging tail, and a gaze full of understanding. Part 7 closes with Lily leaning against Rex, exhausted yet empowered. The courtroom has absorbed her words, the jurors have felt the weight of her experiences, and everyone knows that the next session will bring the final details that could determine the outcome of the case. The final day of testimony had arrived. The courtroom was tense, charged with anticipation. Lily Harper, now familiar with the space and its formalities, knelt beside Rex once more. Her small hands pressed into his thick fur, a lifeline of trust and protection. She had shared so much already, yet the most pivotal pieces of that night's story remained. Today, she would tell them all. Rex, calm and alert, sensed the weight of the moment. His ears twitched slightly, his gaze soft and protective. He had become more than a support animal. He was the bridge that allowed Lily's courage to shine, a silent anchor for the truth she carried. Every movement he made was a reminder, "You are safe. Speak. I am here." The judge adjusted his glasses and nodded gently. "Miss Harper, take your time. Speak to Rex and tell him everything you remember." Lily took a deep breath. She pressed her face to Rex's side, inhaling his warmth, and began to whisper. He came back. Mommy tried to hide. I held my rabbit. I was scared." Her words, though small, carried monumental weight. Every fragment of memory she shared had already changed the courtroom. Now, as she began recounting the final, most terrifying moments, the atmosphere became almost tangible. The jurors leaned forward, rapt with attention. Reporters lowered their cameras in reverent silence. Even the judge seemed suspended in awe, recognizing that this was no ordinary testimony. He shouted. "Mommy cried. I wanted to help." Lily's voice quivered. "But I could, Rex. You were there. You kept me safe." The defense attorney shifted uneasily. No adult witness could have delivered such detailed recollections without influence, but this was not influenced. It was instinctive, raw, true, and guided entirely by the trust between child and dog. Rex responded instinctively, pressing his warm side against her, a subtle, grounding reassurance. Lily inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She continued, He broke the door. I hid under the bed. I tried to be brave, but I was so scared." The jurors, already deeply affected, now began to feel the weight of her courage. They had heard the evidence in charts, reports, and photographs, but nothing conveyed the fear, the terror, and the resilience of that night like Lily's whispered words. The truth had a voice, and it came through a tiny girl speaking to a loyal dog. Her mother, sitting quietly in the gallery, clutched her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. For weeks, she had feared the child would never be able to speak, would never find the courage to reveal the horrors of that night. Now, she was hearing it in fragments, in whispers, yet completely understood, and it brought both relief and heartbreak. The social worker encouraged Lily gently. "You're doing amazing, honey. Tell Rex everything you remember." Lily pressed her cheek against Rex's fur and whispered the final, most critical moments. He grabbed Mommy. I tried to pull him. I screamed. I thought he would hurt us. But you stayed. You kept me safe." Rex shifted slightly, his protective presence unwavering. The courtroom seemed to recognize it instinctively. Here was courage manifest in a child and a dog, a partnership so profound that it defied expectation. The prosecutor, Mr. Callahan, leaned forward slightly, careful not to interrupt but ready to capture every word. He understood that the testimony had gone beyond mere facts. It was emotional, vivid, and undeniable. The jurors were not just hearing a story, they were feeling it. The defense attorney scribbled notes furiously, but his attempts to discredit or redirect were futile. This was raw, instinctive truth delivered in the most extraordinary way imaginable. Every whisper Lily spoke carried weight, corroborated by evidence, and magnified by the bond she had with Rex. He tried to hurt us. I was scared, but you, Rex, you kept me safe." The room was silent except for the faint sound of Lily's breathing and Rex's soft exhalations. Each observer felt the gravity of what had just been recounted. This was testimony not just of events, but of courage, trust, and survival. Even the jurors, instructed to consider only facts, could not ignore the emotional truth unfolding before them. They were witnesses to something extraordinary, a child delivering the unfiltered reality of trauma, guided by the unwavering presence of a dog trained to protect and support. The judge allowed a brief pause. Lily leaned fully against Rex, exhausted but resolute. He rested his massive head on her shoulder, grounding her as she processed the enormity of her disclosure. She had spoken her truth, and the room understood it. The social worker whispered softly, "You did it, Lily. You told Rex everything. You are so brave." Lily smiled faintly, pressing her face into Rex's fur. She had faced fear, relived trauma, and shared her story. And through it all, she had never been alone. Outside the courtroom, whispers of astonishment spread. Reporters knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. The testimony of a 3-year-old delivered not in direct conversation with humans, but through the trust of a dog. The story would be retold across the country, not just for its dramatic elements, but for the profound message it carried. Courage can come in the smallest packages, and support can come on 4 legs. Inside, the jurors quietly discussed what they had seen and heard. They were reminded that evidence is not only facts and figures, it is also trust, courage, and perception. A child's innocence, paired with a loyal companion, had provided clarity that no adult witness could replicate. The defendant shifted uncomfortably. Rex instinctively positioned himself between Lily and the man once more. His gaze, calm yet firm, sent a clear message. The child is safe, the truth will be heard, and justice will not be intimidated. The judge called for the jury to retire for deliberation. The room was heavy with emotion, yet there was a quiet confidence in the outcome. Every observer understood the power of what had just been shared. Lily hugged Rex tightly one final time before leaving the stand. Her small face pressed into his fur, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had allowed her to find courage. He had been her shield, her anchor, and her confidant. Without him, she might never have spoken fully, never revealed the depth of what had occurred. As the courtroom emptied, the jurors whispered among themselves. They had witnessed testimony that transcended conventional boundaries, a story that could only exist because a child trusted a dog. Every fragment of fear, observation, and courage had been delivered with clarity and emotional truth. Hours later, the jury returned. The courtroom was tense but expectant. Each juror's face reflected the weight of the evidence, and none could ignore the emotional truth delivered through Lily and Rex. The foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted quietly with restrained gasps and nods. The judge nodded solemnly, acknowledging the verdict. Lily's mother wept tears of relief, and Rex, still calm and steady, nudged Lily gently as if to say, "You did it. You spoke the truth." Lily smiled faintly, exhausted but triumphant. For a 3-year-old, the courtroom had been a place of fear transformed into empowerment, all because of trust in a dog who understood her in ways humans could not. The judge addressed the courtroom, his voice calm but firm. "This verdict is a testament not only to the evidence, but to the courage of a child who spoke the truth in the face of fear, and to the extraordinary bond between a child and an animal, whose loyalty and instinct provided the safety needed for that truth to emerge." Rex received quiet praise from the officers present. His work that day had gone far beyond what anyone could have expected. He had been a protector, a confidant, and a guide for a child navigating trauma in the most formal and intimidating of spaces. Lily hugged her mother as they left the courtroom, Rex walking faithfully at their side. Her small hand still rested on his fur, a reminder that courage, trust, and companionship could overcome fear, even in the most daunting of circumstances. Outside, the media swarmed, but Lily's mother shielded her. The story had already begun to circulate, a tale of bravery, trust, and the extraordinary bond between a child and a dog. Headlines would describe courage, but the real truth could only be understood by those who had witnessed the whispers, the tiny tremors of fear, and the quiet reassurance of a loyal dog who never let go. And so the story closes. Lily Harper, 3 years old, found her voice through Rex, a police dog whose instinct, loyalty, and calm presence enabled a child to speak the truth. The courtroom had witnessed something extraordinary. Courage delivered not through words alone, but through trust, protection, and an unbreakable bond. In the hearts of everyone present, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, the most profound witnesses are not adults, not lawyers, and not judges. Sometimes they have 4 legs, a tail, and eyes that understand fear and bravery in equal measure. Lily whispered one final word to Rex, her tiny voice full of gratitude. "Thank you." Rex nudged her gently, his eyes soft and knowing. And together, they walked out of the courtroom, leaving behind a story that would inspire and resonate far beyond those walls.